If you're new here, welcome to a journey where humanity stands defiant against the cosmos. Before we begin, take a second to like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment below. Would you stand your ground against something the galaxy itself fears? Your thoughts keep this channel alive, and I love reading your takes. Now, let's dive into today's story. The council chamber had no windows, and yet the delegates kept glancing over their shoulders as though a shadow loomed outside. Thousands of years of power and knowledge had gathered here, each elder race clothed in ceremonial armor or shimmering robes, but their voices were hushed, their dignity cut away by something older than them all. The recorders marked the session as formal, yet the air was thick with superstition. No one dared name the being directly, and still its presence hung in the room. "The rift stirs," rasped a Lidhari elder, his gills trembling with every syllable. "Our long-range arrays confirm it. The predator wakes." A murmur rolled through the chamber. The Kelith delegation covered their faces with silken veils, reciting protective chants. The towering Vorn folded their forearms tightly, as if bracing for impact. Not one dared contradict the claim. From the human delegation, Captain Elias Ward sat straighter. His uniform looked plain compared to the jeweled sashes and polished carapaces around him, but he carried himself with quiet certainty. His dark hair was streaked at the temples, his eyes steady, a man who had stared into the unknown before and refused to blink. Beside him, Draven Holt leaned lazily in his chair, though Elias caught the tension in his jaw. Draven was broader, a soldier-turned-strategist, quick with sarcasm but sharper with tactics. He whispered under his breath, just loud enough for Elias to hear. "They're scared of bedtime stories." Elias didn't reply. He kept his gaze fixed on the speaker's dais as the Lidhari continued. "Worlds will fall again. As they did before. We must prepare evacuations. Systems sacrificed, colonies abandoned. The cycle must repeat, lest we all be consumed." The council's response was immediate, panic laced with formality. Whole empires volunteered to strip their border planets. Others offered fleets to shepherd refugees. The chamber rang with the cold logic of flight. Elias raised his hand. His voice carried not through volume but through clarity, cutting across the chamber like a blade. "With respect, you're talking about surrender before you've even seen this thing." Every gaze turned to him. Some burned with disdain, others with disbelief. A representative from the scaled Vaith hissed openly. "You speak human as if you know the legends. This is not some creature to catalog. This is the Eater of Stars, the Winged Death. Civilizations far greater than yours fled before it." Elias's tone never wavered. "So your solution is to run again? To leave more worlds empty? How many times do you plan on repeating history before you try something different?" Silence. Not agreement, just shock that anyone would challenge what was sacred fear. Draven shifted forward, smirking in that way that always made enemies bristle. "Forgive us," he said, drawl heavy with mock politeness, "but where we come from, when something hunts you, you either face it or you're meat. Running doesn't change the outcome, it just delays it." A ripple of outrage spread through the chamber. Delegates clutched at amulets, muttered curses, even rose from their seats. The presiding elder slammed a staff against the floor, its echo cracking like thunder. "Humans," he declared, his voice trembling between fury and fear, "you are young among us. You do not understand the scale of what you mock. This predator is not prey. It is not a beast to tame. It is annihilation." Elias stood slowly, his shadow stretching long under the chamber's light. He did not posture, did not grandstand. He simply let the weight of his conviction speak. "Maybe annihilation is what you call it. Maybe it's worse. But humanity doesn't run from the dark just because others did. We light a fire and we see what's really there." Gasp. Condemnation. The chamber dissolved into a storm of voices. Some accused the humans of arrogance, others of blasphemy. A few, very few, regarded Elias with something almost like curiosity. When the uproar finally broke, the council issued its declaration. All races were to evacuate the border sectors. Anyone who disobeyed would not be shielded by the council's fleets. Humanity was warned, leave or be left to die. The session ended in chaos. Later, in the solitude of his assigned quarters, Elias removed his uniform jacket and let the silence settle. The chamber's lights dimmed automatically, but he ignored them, spreading old star maps across the table. Not digital displays, paper reproductions, copied from fragments found in forgotten archives. He traced lines between faded constellations, symbols half erased by time. The predator's path, if the records could be believed, was not random. It carved arcs through civilizations like a scythe, but always left gaps as though searching for something. Draven leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. That went well. Elias didn't look up. You think I'm wrong? I think you pissed off half the galaxy in a single sentence. That's gotta be a record. Draven pushed off the wall, pacing. They'll write humanity off as reckless children. And maybe they're right. We don't even know if this thing is flesh, machine, or nightmare. If the legends are true, it tore apart fleets that make ours look like fishing boats. Elias's eyes stayed on the maps. Running never won a war. It only guarantees the enemy keeps coming. Someone has to stop it or at least understand it. Understand it? Draven snorted. You sound like a philosopher. What are you gonna do, invited to dinner? At that, Elias finally looked up. His face was calm, but there was a spark in his gaze. If no one ever tried, how do you know it's impossible? Draven stared at him for a long moment, then shook his head, a reluctant grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. You're insane. But fine. If you're jumping into the fire, I'll be right behind you. Someone's gotta make sure you don't get roasted. Elias folded the maps, each crease sharp. Outside the viewport, the stars of the Orion Rift shimmered faintly, their light bending across the void. For an instant, he thought he saw movement there, a flicker of shadow where none should exist. He blinked. It was gone. Draven followed his gaze. What is it? Nothing, Elias said, though his voice was distant. He could still feel it like a breath against his thoughts. Not sight, not sound, just the awareness of something vast, old, and awake. He turned back to the table, packing the maps with deliberate calm. His decision was already made. Whatever haunted the rift, humanity would not meet it by fleeing. And deep in the void, something shifted, something with wings vast enough to darken suns, eyes that burned with memories of empires long gone. It stirred at the faint echo of defiance, curious, hungry, and for the first time in ages not alone. The Orion Rift was a wound in the galaxy, a stretch of space where stars flickered weakly and gravity obeyed rules no one fully understood. Ships rarely crossed it, and those who did returned whispering of vast silhouettes sliding behind nebula clouds, of echoes on sensors that seemed alive. To the elder races it was cursed. To Elias Ward it was a destination. The Dauntless was not the largest ship in humanity's fleet, nor the most advanced, but it was stubbornly reliable, much like its captain. Its crew moved with disciplined efficiency, though unease threaded every corridor. The council's warnings had spread through the mess halls, and men whispered about what waited in the rift. Some laughed it off, others kept their weapons close even in off-duty hours, but all of them felt the same pressure. They were heading toward the nightmare everyone else ran from. Elias stood on the bridge, watching the rift expand across the viewport. The stars thinned, their brilliance swallowed by a curtain of violet mist. His reflection stared back at him, calm, steady but with shadows under his eyes. He had not slept well since the council meeting. Draven entered with his usual casual stride, a data slate tucked under one arm. He dropped it onto the console with a deliberate thud. Latest scans. Radiation spikes, gravitational anomalies, the usual. And, he paused, letting his tone sharpen. Something big enough to block half our sensors for a full 3 minutes. The bridge went quiet. A technician glanced up nervously, but Elias didn't move. He simply asked, "Where?" "Dead ahead," Draven said. "And before you ask, no, it wasn't an asteroid. No mass signature matches. Whatever it is, it moves." The silence deepened. Elias finally exhaled and gave the order. "Maintain course. All stations alert, but no weapons powered." "Not yet." Draven studied him for a beat, then muttered, "You're really set on this insanity." Elias's voice was low, meant only for him. "If we run now, we'll never stop running. And if the council's right, nothing we have could stop it anyway. Better to see what we're dealing with than die blind." Hours stretched thin. The crew worked in tense silence as the rift swallowed them whole. The mist outside pulsed faintly as though alive. The sensors picked up whispers of mass shifts, objects too vast to be natural. Every few minutes, the ship trembled as though brushed by unseen tides. Then the lights dimmed. The hum of the engines stuttered, not failing, but resonating as if in answer to something vast pressing against reality itself. Alarms chimed and cut abruptly, their signals scrambled. And then it appeared. The viewport filled with scales the color of midnight, each one glimmering with threads of starlight as though it drank the cosmos and reflected it back. The form stretched beyond sight, wings folded close but still vast enough to eclipse the rift's mist. Its eyes opened, twin furnaces of gold and ember, burning with thought. Gasps broke across the bridge. One man cursed, another whispered a prayer. Even Draven froze, his practiced smirk falling away. The being did not attack. It hovered, impossibly graceful for its size, its presence filling the void with an oppressive weight that pressed against every mind aboard. It was not sound, not sight, but awareness, a thought brushing against theirs, testing the edges of their fear. Elias stood, shoulders squared. He did not draw a weapon. He did not give the order to flee. Instead, he stepped closer to the viewport, as though proximity might close the gulf between species. "Open a channel," he said. Draven snapped his head toward him. "You can't be serious." "Open it." Against better judgment, the command was obeyed. The ship's systems tried to translate signals, but Elias overrode them. Instead of words or code, he ordered something simple: music. A fragment of Earth's heritage, old folk strings and steady rhythm, broadcast into the dark. The sound was swallowed instantly by the void. For a moment there was only silence. Then the massive creature tilted its head, the light in its eyes flickering. Its wings shifted, scattering mist like storm clouds. The bridge crew held their breath. And then it moved, circling the Dauntless like a predator measuring prey. Yet no strike came. Its gaze locked on Elias through the viewport, not on the ship itself but on him. For an instant, he felt his mind split wide, as if a floodgate had been opened. Images crashed into him. Empires burning, fleets scattering before wings that blotted suns. Elder races fleeing into the dark, screaming in terror. And beneath it all, a gnawing loneliness, as though the galaxy's fear had left the creature adrift, unchallenged, untouchable, alone. Elias staggered, gripping the console to stay upright. His breath came shallow, but he did not look away. Draven caught him, voice low and urgent. "What the hell did it do to you?" "Not an attack," Elias rasped. He forced the words out. "It wanted me to see." The pressure in his skull eased, the visions receding. The dragon, because what else could it be called, drifted back, its colossal form settling just beyond the ship, like a shadow waiting. The crew whispered in disbelief. One man muttered, "It could have killed us all." Another said, "Why didn't it?" Elias straightened, his voice steady again. "Because it chose not to." The ship remained in its silent orbit for long hours, the creature never leaving. When the engines were tested, it followed. When communications were attempted, it hovered close enough to disrupt them. It did not permit escape, but it did not strike. That night, when the ship's lights dimmed to simulate rest cycles, Elias lingered alone in the observation deck. The dragon's form filled the void, its breath stirring clouds of violet mist. He pressed a hand against the glass, absurdly aware of how small he was. A voice flickered in his mind, not words, not language, but meaning. A question without phrasing, a pulse of intent. "What?" Elias whispered back, not knowing if he spoke aloud or only in thought. "Because someone has to stop running." The presence pressed closer, and for a heartbeat he thought it might consume him. But then the weight eased, replaced by something unexpected: acknowledgement. Behind him, Draven's voice broke the moment. "You're out of your mind." Elias turned. Draven leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, though his eyes darted uneasily at the massive shadow beyond the glass. "You saw what I saw," Elias said. "I saw death circling us like we're scraps on a plate." Draven shook his head. "And you? You talk to it like it's a stray dog." Elias's expression softened, just slightly. "Maybe that's the point. Maybe it's been treated like a monster for so long, it doesn't remember what it feels like to be anything else." Draven's silence stretched, his jaw tight. Finally he muttered, "If this thing kills us, I'm haunting you." Elias almost smiled. "Fair enough." The dragon's golden eyes lingered on him through the viewport, as if listening. When dawn cycle came, the ship's logs would show no damage, no attack, no reason for panic except the undeniable truth. The predator had found them and it had not left. The elder races would have run. Humanity had not. And now the galaxy's oldest terror drifted beside them, curious, waiting. The council had no language for what they were seeing. Grainy transmissions poured across the network, every elder race intercepting fragments of humanity's feeds from the rift. Images spread faster than censorship could contain them. Images of the predator, the destroyer of civilizations, drifting beside a single human ship without unleashing fire. The footage was shaky, the scale incomprehensible, but the truth was undeniable. The monster was alive, awake, and it was following. Across worlds, panic roared like wildfire. On the border colonies, citizens packed ships and fled, convinced annihilation trailed behind the humans. On ancient homeworlds, Priests declared omens, councils drafted war measures, and entire fleets were redirected. To them, the predator's silence was not mercy, it was a cruelty worse than death. And yet, in the human outpost on Meridian's Reach, Elias Ward stood calmly as the dragon settled on the ground outside their settlement like a mountain folding itself into place. The colony lights painted its scales and bands of silver and gold, each movement so vast it stirred winds across the valley. The crew gathered at the perimeter, weapons ready though everyone knew they would do nothing. Draven cursed under his breath. We built this place to house 6,000 people. Now it's got one unwanted guest the size of a continent. Not unwanted, Elias said quietly. Draven shot him a look. Tell that to the colonists watching from the bunkers. They're praying it doesn't roll over in its sleep and flatten us. But Elias wasn't listening to him anymore. His gaze was locked on the creature, its eyes glowing faintly in the dark. He felt the same presence pressing into his thoughts, not invasive now but steady, curious. It did not claw through his mind, it lingered waiting. That night, when most of the crew hid inside reinforced halls, Elias walked alone to the edge of the dragon's shadow. He sat against one of its forelegs, the scales cool and impossibly smooth beneath his back. Draven found him there hours later, muttering curses as he approached. You're out here unarmed. Next to that. Elias's eyes were half closed, not in sleep but in something close to it. It hasn't hurt us. It hasn't hurt anyone. That doesn't mean it won't. Elias opened his eyes and looked up at the endless body rising above him, wings folded like the walls of a fortress. If it wanted to, it would have already. It's waiting for something else. Draven folded his arms, frustration fighting with unease. You sound like you're starting to trust it. Elias didn't answer because trust was too small a word. What he felt wasn't certainty of safety, it was recognition. The memories it had shown him hadn't been all destruction. Buried beneath the fire and ruin were other flashes. Skies filled with laughter, warmth curling around smaller beings, a bond so old it felt mythic. The galaxy remembered only its wrath. Humanity, for the first time, glimpsed its loneliness. In the days that followed, the impossible became routine. The dragon slept near the colony, its body coiled protectively around the outpost at night. Colonists whispered in awe and terror, but the promised apocalypse never came. Instead, the predator breathed slow, each exhalation stirring the earth, its presence like a shield no weapon could match. The elder races demanded answers. Council transmissions came daily, each more furious than the last. They accused humanity of harboring death, of endangering every star system. They demanded Elias explain why the predator had not destroyed them. His response was the same each time, because we didn't run. The council called it madness. Some called it treachery. Others, though few, began to wonder if there was more to fear than the predator, that perhaps it was humanity they should be watching. Inside the colony, the crew adjusted in their own ways. Soldiers kept their rifles close even as they stopped pointing them. Engineers joked darkly about requesting extra-large maintenance bays. At night, when the dragon's breathing shook the ground, some slept easier, convinced no enemy fleet would dare approach with such a guardian looming outside. Draven remained the loudest skeptic, though even he began to soften. One evening he found Elias resting against the dragon's side again, the glow of its scales casting strange shadows. You do realize the whole galaxy thinks you've gone insane, Draven said, lowering himself beside him. Elias smiled faintly. Wouldn't be the first time. You're not even afraid anymore. Of course I'm afraid, Elias admitted. But fear doesn't have to mean surrender. Draven studied him, then the massive curve of the creature's body towering above them. After a long silence he muttered, if this thing really is choosing us, I don't know whether to be relieved or terrified. The dragon stirred as if acknowledging the words, and its great head lowered until its golden eye filled the sky. For an instant, Draven felt the same mental brush Elias had described. He stiffened, his hand twitching toward his sidearm but then stopped. The presence wasn't hostile. It wasn't even commanding. It was simply there waiting to be acknowledged. He exhaled shakily. All right. Maybe I see what you mean. Elias's gaze never left the eye above them. It's not our enemy. Not unless we make it one. Word spread quickly through the colony. Photos of Elias leaning against the dragon's flank, of Draven sitting unarmed beside its head, were smuggled off-world and went viral across human space. For the first time, humanity was not portrayed as reckless explorers or defiant soldiers. They were the species who sat calmly beside what the galaxy called death. The elder races could not process it. Panic turned to outrage. Petitions were filed to strip humanity of council membership. Fleets were quietly armed. Some whispered of preemptive strikes to ensure humanity did not wield the predator as a weapon. The humans, meanwhile, did nothing but continue. Elias gave no speeches, issued no threats. He simply stayed where he was, beside the creature everyone else feared, showing by his presence alone that coexistence was possible. But coexistence would not last unchallenged. On the seventh night, the dragon's dreams spilled over. Elias woke with a start, his mind awash with visions not his own. He saw the galaxy as it had been millennia ago, when elder races were still young. He saw them approach the dragon with fear, weapons ready, and saw himself, or someone like him, stand at its side, unafraid. There had been others once. Others who treated it not as a god or monster, but as a companion. And then he saw betrayal. Fire rained from fleets. Trust shattered. The dragon's kin vanished, and it alone survived, wounded not only in flesh but in memory. 4 ages it wandered, hunted, cursed, until the galaxy rewrote it into myth. Elias sat up, trembling, the echoes of its grief still searing through him. Draven was awake too, watching with wary eyes. "What did you see?" "Not just a predator," Elias said hoarsely. "A guardian. Broken. Alone." Draven swore softly, running a hand through his hair. "You realize if the council hears that, they'll call it propaganda. They'll never believe you." "Doesn't matter," Elias said. His jaw tightened. "We've seen it. That's enough." Outside, the dragon shifted in its sleep, curling tighter around the colony like a parent shielding its child. The next morning, council warships appeared on long-range sensors, moving toward human space. The message was clear. If humanity would not abandon the predator, the elder races would force the issue. Elias watched the alert lights flash across the command console. The dragon stirred, lifting its head, eyes narrowing as though it too sensed the approaching threat. Draven stood beside him, grim but steady. "Looks like the galaxy's finally coming to test your theory." Elias's reply was quiet, resolute. "Then we'll show them." The predator's golden eyes burned brighter, and for the first time since its awakening, a sound rumbled from its throat, a low, resonant growl that shook the valley, the kind of sound that promised the universe would remember what it had chosen to fear. And humanity, standing beside it, did not flinch. The atmosphere within the fractured halls of the Galactic Council was unlike anything Eric had ever experienced. He stood on the marble-like floor, hands locked tightly behind his back as the chamber lights shimmered with an almost stormy hue. Dozens of elder races filled the crescent tiers above, their forms shifting, cloaked, armored, or obscured behind veils of energy fields. They were whispering, not out of habit, but out of fear, and every glance shot downward was not at Eric, but at the creature lying coiled protectively at his side. Kael'thas, scales glinting like liquid fire, was draped across the steps with his wings partially furled, golden eyes half-lidded yet sharp enough to burn through any courage left in the council. His chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm, but beneath that calm exterior, everyone could sense the storm that lingered beneath, the instinct of the apex predator that had once scattered fleets and forced civilizations to hide among dark nebulae. The tension was unbearable. "Human," rasped a figure whose shape flickered like living smoke, one of the oldest among them. "Explain. Why does the predator lie in your keeping? Why does it not destroy you as it destroyed our worlds? What bond have you conjured that defies extinction?" Eric's jaw tightened, though he did not immediately respond. His hand drifted instinctively to Kael'thas' scaled hide, a gesture that earned a collective gasp from the chamber. His palm brushed along the warm ridges of the dragon's neck, and Kael'thas, as though sensing his reassurance, let out a low rumble that vibrated through the marble and rattled the council's seats. Some members flinched backward, others nearly drew their weapons before thinking better of it. Beside Eric, Marcus raised his chin, defiance sparking in his eyes. "You fear what you don't understand," he said, his voice carrying across the chamber. "For centuries you've run from it. You built legends, turned the predator into a ghost to terrify your young. But we've lived beside it. We've shared our homes with it. We've seen more than a monster, you've only seen your own fear reflected back." The chamber erupted into overlapping voices, accusations, and alarms. Some demanded proof that humans were not under enchantment, others called for Kael'thas' immediate execution, while a few dared suggest humanity had somehow weaponized him. The swirl of noise pressed in, until Kael'thas himself lifted his head, stretching his wings outward just enough to cast a shadow across the entire chamber. Silence fell instantly. Kael'thas' voice, deep and resonant, filled the chamber without effort. "You call me predator, destroyer, nightmare. I was those things. I hunted because I was alone, because nothing stayed my hunger, because nothing dared stand beside me. Then humanity found me. His golden eyes narrowed as they swept across the terrified assembly. And they did not run. The elder races shifted, unsettled. One cloaked figure hissed, "What trick is this? Humans are fragile, yet you—" "I slept," Kealthes rumbled, cutting him off. "I allowed them to share their den, their fire, their rest. I did not consume them, though I could have. They spoke to me as if I were more than teeth and flame. And so, I became more. For the first time in eons, I remembered silence without hunger." Eric could feel the truth in every word. He remembered the first night Kealthes had curled around their campfire, his wings forming a shield against the cold. He remembered the quiet weight of the dragon's head lowering beside his bedroll, and the way Marcus had nervously laughed, whispering, "Guess we've got a new blanket." That moment had broken centuries of instinctive fear, for both sides. A representative with crystalline skin and glowing veins leaned forward, voice sharp. "If what you say is true, then humanity has done what no elder race has ever achieved. You have tamed the apex predator. What stops you from unleashing it upon us as vengeance for every slight, every dismissal we have cast your kind's way?" Marcus stepped forward, anger lacing his words. "Because that isn't who we are. We don't build bonds as weapons. We build them because that's how we survive, how we thrive. Kealthes isn't a leash. He isn't ours to control. He chose us." Kealthes' head dipped slightly, a gesture that seemed almost approving. The council chamber buzzed again, this time with unease rather than outrage. Centuries of politics were colliding with something raw and primal. The elder races had always positioned themselves as guardians of balance, but in that moment, they were staring at an undeniable truth. Humanity had forged a connection where they had only ever seen destruction. The whispers turned darker. A tall, armored being rose, his segmented exoskeleton clattering with each motion. "If the predator chose humanity, then humanity becomes a threat. You shelter what should have been eradicated. You give it reason to remain. You will unmake the galaxy's balance. For this, you must be contained." Eric felt his pulse spike. He leaned subtly against Kealthes' side, but his voice cut sharp through the air. "Contain us? You've already tried to contain your fear by running. Where did that leave you? Whole fleets burned, colonies lost, systems abandoned to shadows. Containment doesn't work. Understanding does." The armored being scoffed, but before another word could spark chaos, Kealthes unfurled his wings to their full span. The chamber's light bent against the iridescent membranes, casting streaks of color across the stone. His roar shook the air like thunder. "You speak of balance," Kealthes bellowed. "But I am balance. I am the predator that reminded you of your limits, the storm that tested your strength. And now I am proof that even the darkest hunger can be calmed, not by chains, not by blades, but by something you all abandoned long ago: trust." The chamber trembled under the weight of his words. Eric's heart pounded, but a strange calm settled over him. For the first time, he realized the council wasn't just afraid of Kealthes. They were afraid of humanity's ability to walk beside him unscathed. Marcus leaned close, whispering just loud enough for Eric to hear, "They'll never forgive us for this." Eric's eyes stayed locked on the tiers above, where expressions of fear, disbelief, and reluctant awe collided. "Maybe not," he murmured. "But they'll never forget it either." The silence stretched, and though no verdict was yet cast, Eric knew the council was fracturing before his eyes. Some wanted war, others demanded exile, and a few, just a few, saw something else: the possibility that humanity had altered the galaxy's course forever. Kealthes settled back down, curling his body once more around his chosen humans. His eyes glowed faintly, not with rage but with certainty. The predator was no longer untouchable. He was bound not by force but by choice. And that choice would ripple across every star system before the council could decide what to do next. The grand hall of the Elder Council lay in ruin. Stone pillars lay shattered, the once proud banners of the ancient races burned in curling black smoke, and silence pressed heavy over the fractured chamber. Yet at its center, amidst the rubble and the awe-stricken remnants of species who had for eons called themselves masters of the stars, stood a human man and the creature they had spent millennia fearing. Elias had one hand resting against the scaled jaw of Drathus, the dragon who had haunted their histories and reshaped their myths into terror. But the beast's gaze, golden and burning with fire as old as suns, softened each time Elias's touch lingered. They looked not like predator and prey, not like conqueror and victim, but like two halves of a single truth finally revealed. Across the floor, Elder Vaitha's crystalline body flickered, shards trembling under the weight of what had unfolded. "Impossible," he whispered, his voice brittle, cracked with disbelief. "It cannot be. Humans are our prey. How does he command it? How does he survive it?" Elias turned, his voice calm but edged with something steel-hard. "Maybe because we never saw it as a monster," he said. "Maybe because humanity doesn't cower the way you do. We make friends in the strangest places. We break bread with those you flee from. You feared this dragon for millennia, and yet you never tried to understand it." Drathus's throat rumbled, a deep growl echoing like thunder rolling through the broken chamber. Elder races who had ruled galaxies flinched instinctively, bowing under instincts older than their civilizations. But Elias remained steady, his hand never leaving the beast. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, locked on those of the council. "You see a predator," Elias continued. "I see a protector. A friend. And maybe that's why you've ruled so long in fear, because you never believed anything stronger than yourselves could ever choose loyalty over domination." The words struck deep. Murmurs rippled among the delegations of alien races, voices trembling with the first edges of doubt. For the first time in millennia, the myth of invulnerability fractured. Not the myth of the dragon but the myth of their dominion. Elder Vaitha's luminous eyes flared, his pride resisting surrender. "You dare speak of friendship when that thing," he pointed a trembling shard hand at Drathus, "has erased fleets, devoured worlds, ended empires? You call that protector?" Drathus's chest swelled, heat shimmering as if stars themselves kindled within his ribs. The council recoiled, instinct screaming flight. But Elias did not move, his voice rising above the quake of scales. "Every predator hunts," he said. "Every being fights to survive. But when you corner something, when you chain it, when you call it nothing but a weapon, that's when you make it into a monster. You fled. We offered trust. That's the difference." The dragon exhaled slowly, flames spilling like ribbons of light rather than destruction, curling harmlessly around Elias's shoulders. The sight silenced the hall. A human, bathed in fire, untouched, fearless, hand pressed against the living embodiment of every nightmare the galaxy had ever known. Elder Vaith faltered, his form dimming as cracks spread through his crystalline chest. His voice broke, desperate. "Then what will you do, human? Let it against us? Replace us as masters of the stars?" Elias stepped forward, Drathus's massive head lowering beside him in silent agreement. "I don't want to rule your stars. I don't care about your thrones. But you will never again call humanity weak. You will never again look at us as prey. The galaxy will learn a new truth. Some predators choose us. Some choose to share our bed, our fire, our fight." The chamber fell into silence, a silence more absolute than any war cry. The words spread like fire in dry grass, leaping across minds and cultures in attendance. The dragon lowered its head in a gesture no elder race had ever witnessed. Submission not to power but to companionship. And beside it, Elias stood not as conqueror but as equal. The moment shattered the order of millennia. Elder races who had once demanded tribute and submission now bowed, not to the dragon, but to the human who had tamed it by refusing to tame it at all. Drathus shifted, wings unfolding with a sound like entire worlds exhaling. Dust swept through the chamber, catching in the light of distant suns spilling through broken walls. Elias climbed onto the dragon's neck, his hands sliding along scales that glimmered like forged obsidian. He glanced back only once, meeting the eyes of the stunned council. "You can choose fear," he told them. "Or you can choose trust. Humanity already made its choice." The dragon leapt, wings cracking air, and together they burst through the open sky. The fractured council chamber shook under the force of their ascent, and every elder present knew something irreversible had just been written into history. Above the ruined citadel, stars burned sharp and endless, a sea of possibilities stretching beyond imagination. Drathus's great body cut through the void, and Elias, pressed against his scaled neck, felt not terror but exhilaration. The beast who had once been the galaxy's nightmare roared into the cosmos, but this time the sound was not of dread, it was a proclamation. Worlds would tremble, yes. Empires would fall, undoubtedly. But a new myth had been born, one that no elder tongue could contain. That humanity, small and fragile though it seemed, had found kinship where gods themselves had fled. And in that kinship, the universe had met its deadliest paradox. Predator and human. Dragon and man. Not chained, not commanded, but united. The stars themselves seemed to bow as the two vanished into the horizon of the galactic night, their legend already burning brighter than any empire. The end was not silence. It was a roar, it was a promise, and it was a bond eternal, one the galaxy would never forget.